You mentioned soulmate myth earlier. So do you not believe your wife is your soulmate?
I don't believe in the soulmate as in general. Now, I have, this is I write straight out of my first book. It's actually the first chapter of my first book, is there is no one. And people keep using the term like, oh, I think he's the one or she's the one. Even guys will use that now. And it's this idea that there's one perfect person out there for you and you just haven't met the one just yet. And which on the surface of it, from just, pragmatically thinking and rationally thinking, it's kind of ludicrous to think that, because there's how many people on planet Earth? I mean, there's people you will click with for sure, and there's people who you won't click with, and maybe you're in a toxic relationship with. But as far as the idea of the soulmate myth is really a story or a mythology that we tell ourselves to support socially enforced monogamy. So we have to have, if we're going to get people to just pair up with one-to-one, and we want a society that is built on, like I said, socially enforced monogamy, or just like straight up monogamy, one man, one woman in a heterosexual relationship. And there has to be some sort of unitary belief set that goes along with that. And part of that comes from what this is out of my fourth book, but there's the idea of what's called the romantic ideal, meaning one man, one woman, and the man will do anything for his lady, and it's, he's the knight in shining armor, and he'll go to war for her and die for her, and it's this sort of noble ideal, because they are two star-crossed lovers, and they met out of, beyond all chance. And so therefore they're soulmates together. Your soul belongs with my soul before we were even born, kind of thing. And it becomes, part and parcel of religion. It becomes part of this sort of ideological belief set. In the book, in my first book, I relate in the very beginning of that chapter this experience I had where I was in college, and I was at a behavioral psychology classes, and the teacher asked, say, how many people believe in God? And like very few people actually believe. Most of them were atheists. And then they asked, how many people believe that there is a perfect person out there for them, that there's a one or a soulmate? And every damn hand went up, and I'm like, how can you believe in a soulmate but you don't believe in God? Because there's this endemic want for that to be true. And that was really what set me off on the soulmate myth and the fallacy of the one, which is there is no one. There are some good ones and there are some bad ones, but there is no just a one, right? And I was kind of like springboarding that off of what the old school pickup artists would call one-itis, right? So you catch feelings for one person, you think it's the one, she's the one, right? So she's the one I'm going to marry, she's the one I'm going to have a relationship with. So is my wife my soulmate? We are a very good match. Let's just put it that way. And we have been so for a long time. Do I feel like there's some sort of spiritual element between my wife and I? Yeah, but I refuse the idea of the mythology of the soulmate myth, because what happens is then you get over-invested. And so it leads to a scarcity mentality, and it leads to losing your identity. And quite honest, and this is speaking from like 28 years of being married, a good marriage is built on polarity, not on similarity. It's built on polarity. It's built on maintaining your identities and not having one or the other try to reinvent their personality because they think that that's what the other person wants. Because if they lose that person, that's their soulmate. And if you lose that soulmate, it's like a Michael Bolton song, how am I supposed to live without you? Something sappy, saccharine sweet like that. So it doesn't, honestly, I think it's probably one of the most debilitating beliefs that especially, not so much now, but like when I was writing the books in the first place, like the very first book, that was something that every guy was, look, I want to find the one. I want to find some, perfect relationship who's going to be just, who's going to be as much into me as I'm into her.
Right.
And it was just this, there's a lot to that. And that's actually the reason why I made that the very first chapter in the book, because I thought if somebody reads this book, what do I want? Like they only read one chapter. They go, okay, I'm going to read this and throw it away, right? If they read one chapter, what's the most important message? And that was the most important message.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, I don't like when people use that as a crutch, but at the same time, here's where I differ from the red pill stuff. I think sex is more than just a physical experience, and they're just racking up bodies, and I think it's pretty spiritual, honestly.
I I would only part ways with that in the sense that I understand the visceral side of it. I understand I understand guys who want to apply a cosmic meaning to sex. And usually it's guys who don't have a lot of experience. So that's another reason why I encourage, but I understand like the necessity for spinning plates and dating non-exclusively, because it gives you a better perspective on what actually, at least the physical act of what sex is, right? So whenever I'm talking to guys who have sort of a limited experience with sexuality, they always tend to sort of spiritualize, it doesn't even have to be that. It doesn't even have to necessarily be religion. It could be meaningful sex, meaningless, meaningful. Meaning, the word meaning is a container word, and you can put anything you want to into that container. So if meaningful sex to me is getting, a blowjob every 2 weeks, right? Has meaning for me. Who are you to tell me that that's not, right? Well, it's because we can contextualize that and put that into that container, and then we can use that as sort of our justification for anything else that we want. Now, is there some sort of cosmic significance to sex? I mean, if you look at it from just a physical side of things, what is the there's the proximate goal or the proximate outcome, and then there's the ultimate outcome. So the proximate outcome is when I saw my wife in the club that night, I wasn't thinking, I wonder if she'd be a really good mother for my child. I wonder if we would be a really good fit together and she would make a good wife and everything else. That wasn't what I was thinking. I was like, I want to tap that ass. How do I tap that ass is what I was thinking, right? Because that was my proximate goal at that time, right? The ultimate goal, of course, or the ultimate outcome of all of that was I reproduce with her. I have a child with her who's a wonderful kid who is married herself now as of last year, just celebrated her first anniversary. And we both are on the same page spiritually. We're both on the same page sort of like life plan wise. We're very compatible, but we're also respect each other's individual identities too. So the things that I want to do, like people always ask me this, they'll say like, Rollo, why aren't you married? Why are you hanging out with these Maxim models or these FHM models? Well, I'm sort of vicariously living a lifestyle that they think is in some way counterintuitive to what they would expect from, like, say, someone who's been married for 28 years. And the thing is that's how good a match I am with my wife, is that it's okay for me to be doing this. It's all right for me to be doing these things.
She trusts you.
Because she trusts me, and she knows that there's no way in hell I'm going to cheat. I've never cheated on my wife.
Wow,
and I never would, right?
Congrats.
But again, it's, when you're looking at sex from a spiritual side of things, and you have that as sort of your base ideology, for lack of a better term. It starts to become that's when I get those guys who will say, well, how can you do this? Well, because you don't understand that I have come to the relationship I'm in with my wife right now because I did all those other things, because I had those experiences. I'm not saying all of them were great,
right?
I don't necessarily, of all of the women that I've been with over the course of my life, maybe I regret one or two, or two, something like that. And usually it's just after the fact. I wasn't regretting it at the time, but it's usually after the fact, because you're kind of like saying, oh, that was kind of a mistake. I could have used my time more efficiently.
Right.
And especially when you get into your 50s, you look back and you go, how could I have done that better? And then try to relate. And of course, nobody listens to you anyways. Yeah. But like, how would I have done that better? How could I have made that more efficient? How could I have made that a better decision at that time? And it was hardly ever the sexual experience. It was all the fallout that came after that. So if I'm like in a relationship with a borderline personality disorder girlfriend, which I had when I was in my mid-20s, I didn't realize it at the time. I thought it was great sex. Man. Yeah. But the thing is that, but she was crazy in bed and crazy out of bed. And so it wasn't the sex part of it. It was everything else that was outside of that. And so going through that and understanding that and learning all that stuff is what really helped contribute to a lot of the stuff that I write in my books, or at least it motivated me to do the things and have the interests that I do. So, I can remember, being in college, and I was going, I think it was the first time I was just a undergrad at that time. And I was looking at the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for like psychology, and of course it's like this, basically it's this big giant, catalog of all these like personality disorders, and they tell you like when you're reading this thing, don't take it with a grain of salt, because you'll see all of these like symptoms in all of your friends, and they all say, everyone, oh, you're schizophrenic and you're bipolar, and like that. So you'll overdiagnose it in the beginning. But there was one part where I came across the cluster B personality disorders, and one of those is borderline personality disorder, and it was exactly, every single symptom was what my mid-20s girlfriend had at that time, and I was just like, and I got chills. So when I finally realized that there was actually a diagnosis for that, that's when I began to think that just to understand how important it was for me to have gone through that and get out of it, so that when I'm talking to guys who are in that position right there, here's what you can look for, and here's what you're dealing with, and here's the decisions that you're probably going to need to make to get out of that, extricate yourself from that situation. So, so when it comes to whether it's a spiritual thing for sex, or if it's the physical side of sex, because I tend to look at, I've written a book on religion. It's called Religion. The title of the book is Religion, the Rational Male Religion. The very last chapter in that book, I go into, and I'm not going to give it to you. I hope people will read it. Right? It's chapter 14. It's the last chapter, because people want to say, "Well, Rolly, you're the rational male. How can you believe in God?" Right? And I'm like, "Well, I do, and I come to it from a very rational perspective." Oh yeah. And I think the very fact that I do that, like I come to that beliefs through a series of saying, like, sort of if-then logic. When I get to that point, I think the people who are like atheists hate my guts, and the people who are religious hate my guts too, because I kind of destroy the magic for believers, and then I kind of like throw like the more like atheist kind of readers off track, because they tend to think of me as being like sort of like way more logical, right? Or they demand like Mr. Spock levels of like cutting off your emotional side, right? And which I think is, emotion is part of the human experience, right? So if sex is some cosmically significant act for you, that's still part of the magic for you. At least you haven't lost that magical side, right? But the thing is that really what is the visceral side of it? What's the physical side? What's the material side of it? Right. Which is essentially, it's for reproduction. You want to have sex because it's fun and it feels good, and you're making a connection with your wife or your girlfriend. I guess you're married, right? About to be, yeah. About to be married. Congratulations. Thank you. We'll dive into that after this. But I'm not saying you shouldn't necessarily dissociate spirituality from it, but I'm just saying I think we do ourselves a disservice when it's just about the spiritual, or it's just about the physical. No, I think it's both. Yeah, coming together, right? Yeah. The thing is like the people who throw me off, like who want to say, "You're married, how can you be with these girls and these and everything?" They are all coming from like a strictly spiritual perspective. Right. Whereas then there's the other guys who are like, who want to say, well, it's all about just notch count, and everything is like. By the way, I don't see it like that either. I think that's probably a misperception that a lot of people have about the red pill, that it's just about getting your wet and it's measuring your ego by your notch count. It's not that, but there's that contingency of guys who want to say that. I think there needs to be sort of this understanding or mutual appreciation of the visceral, the animal side of us, and the spiritual side of us, because usually we tend to live in one or the other. And I think that there can be a balance between those two.